Hello, everyone. How are we feeling this week? Good. We're in the middle of the week, which that's obviously a downer, but we got NetSuite and we got homework to go through. So hopefully that'll bring things up. Before we get started, I want to make an announcement, and I apologize. I wanted to actually show you the job listing, but I clicked on my email to bring up the job listing, and it said the link is no longer active, which I'm assuming that I just have a dead link and not that the job is no longer available. But this was brought to my attention by actually a former GTRA of mine. It's from Enterprise Bank and Trust in St. Louis, and they have a finance intern position that is available. And my GTRA, who's taking over as a manager in the organization, really wants a Truman student in this position because he's a Truman graduate. So if you're looking for a summer internship position, if you are interested in looking at a finance position, I can't bring up the job opportunity here on the website because I'm not exactly sure which one it is, but I do know it's posted at the Career Center, the Truman State Career Center. It's on the Handshake platform, so you can reach out. I'm almost certain that it's still viable. It's still live because he told me that the job applications were going to be open until mid-November. So November, yeah, 14th, yeah. So if you're interested in that position, please investigate. And I think that if you get a chance to talk to him, his name's Austin Tinsley. He's a former baseball player here at Truman State. He was actually on the team that played in the Division II World Series back in the mid 2010s. So a standout guy. Have very high respect for him, and he's reaching out for this, and it's a great opportunity. Anyway, speaking of opportunities, we've got some opportunities with NetSuite to explore. So we've talked about the purchasing process already, and our purchasing process was pretty straightforward. We created an inventory item, and then we bought that inventory item. Now we need to sell it because that makes sense as a business, is that we want to buy items so that we can eventually sell them, at least in a retail perspective. That's about as far as we're going to go. By the way, just as a quick note for your assignment 2 weeks from now, which will be the final NetSuite assignment that you will do in class, we're going to have two walkthrough activities. We're going to have today, and we're going to have a week from now. We're going to do a walkthrough. Then the final NetSuite assignment, basically going to parlay all of your knowledge from the last four assignments, and you're going to do another activity, and this one's going to be on your own. Now, I'll be here to provide guidance and provide information, but you will be creating new products, and you will be selling those products. In addition, you'll be selling some service items as well. Now, I will give you instructions, give you details and instructions on how to do that. It's very similar to the process that we've walked through, but there will be some new opportunities for you to be able to do for these assignments and these activities. So please make sure you're taking diligent notes, as you will be revisiting this again, not just on the exam, but also as part of this assignment in a couple of weeks. So hopefully everybody's signed in. What we're going to do first is we're going to make some changes to some forms. Now, we haven't done this yet, and I think that this is a meaningful activity. It's not going to be particularly difficult, but I do think that it's important to actually look at how we can do some form changes and some adaptations. What we're going to do is going to be very, very simple and straightforward. But first and foremost, it is very important that when I give you an instruction to do something, you follow it to the letter. And this is a problem I've been having in all of my classes this semester, is that everybody's kind of like saying, all right, well, Dr. Barnes gave me this instruction. I basically followed it. I followed like 75% of it. Some of these items, you need to do this 100% exactly the way I tell you. If you skip a step, if you miss a word, it's going to create all kinds of pandemonium, all right? So when I stop and I say, this is the exact wording you have to use, this shouldn't be a point where you say, I wonder if it's on social media right now. This should be a point where everything kind of drops and you say, I'm going to spend the next 30 seconds just focused on this man and the words of wisdom he's about to share. Because if I don't follow these instructions, it's going to be problematic. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this for everything in your life. Definitely do not use me as an example for everything in your life. But for these specific explicit instructions, please do. All right. When I give you a specific instruction to follow, please make sure you're following it to the letter, because it will become problematic if you don't follow those instructions. All right, so let's go ahead and let's do some form manipulation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to customization, which is a tool we've not used yet. And we're going to go to forms. And then we're going to go over to transaction forms. So forms, customization, forms, transaction forms, and go ahead and click on that. Customization, forms, transaction forms. And what we will note here is that we've got a lot of forms that relate to transactions that occur all across the business process. Now, we could have done this in purchasing because purchasing involves forms here, but I thought it was most appropriate, since we were already doing an activity in purchasing of creating a new item, that we would save this for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own forms for particular revenue use. Now, let's think about what the steps in the revenue process are. They're pretty basic. So in the revenue process, we start out with the customer requesting a quote, which we'd probably receive a quote, which is external to this process. But once we agreed upon whether or not the quote is acceptable, the customer will send us a purchase order. Now, it's important to note that this purchase order is not the same as the purchase order in the purchasing process. This is the customer's purchase order that they are sending to us. So this is an external document. Presumably, we would have some external document that we would use to generate our own system inputs. So what is our first step that we would follow in the system? That would be the creation of a sales order. So this is remember, the sales orders for the revenue process. This is derived from the customer's request, which is that purchase order. So we will not create a purchase order because the customer is creating that. Instead, we're going to create a sales order from what would be presumably a customer purchase order. Once we've created that sales order, then we're going to go and move forward, and we're going to say, all right, sales order is going to lead to a shipping item. We're going to have some sort of shipping documentation, which we will have some shipping documentation, but it's going to be implicit. Once we've shipped out the item to the customer, we need to send them a bill, which our bills are called invoices. So we send them the invoice, and then we're going to actually receive the payment, and we're going to process their payment. So we're going to have three documents that we need to identify on. And this will not just be 3 steps. We're going to have multiple steps beyond this, but we do need to have explicitly 3 documents. That's going to be our sales order, our invoice, and our customer payment. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to start out with sales order. What I'd like you to do is scroll down on this window right here, and we're going to go and identify sales orders. And you'll notice that there are multiple documents that are listed as sales order documents here. The one that defaults is just called sales order. It's form 305, and I can identify it. Now, optimally, what I would like to do is I would like to customize this particular form and use this as my document. I would like to use it for specific purposes. But there's a problem with this, and you will notice that it puts a picture of a lock on here, which basically means that we can't edit this document. We cannot edit this document. If we try to, we can make changes to it, but it will say, yeah, you can't actually create this document, change this document because it's locked for editing. We're going to bypass that. We're going to use this document, but we're going to create a new copy, a new version of it. So here's what we need to do. And we're going to be walking through this process multiple times. So step by step is going to be really important. So step 1, we're going to actually make sure that we identify the sales order. And this is the one that's currently preferred. Okay. We have to identify that this is preferred. On the left-hand side, let's click on the word customize. And this is going to bring up the sales order. Basically, what we would be doing is we would be setting up a custom sales order form for ourselves. In order to do this, we can't save the original sales order form or edit the original sales order form. We need to copy it and create a new sales order form. This is actually a pretty easy process. But again, like I said, if you miss a step, you may end up regretting it. I shouldn't say may. You will end up regretting it because you'll have to go back and watch this video again and hear all of my bad jokes. And nobody wants that. Okay. So let's just go ahead and work through this. All right. So this is the first step that we're going to be working through. And this is going to be the same process that we do for all 3 forms. What we're going to do is we're going to change the name of this particular form. And the naming of this form is particularly important. We're going to call this primary sales order form. Not primary sales order, not sales order form, primary sales order form. All 4 words are important. Now, the reason why these 4 words are important is that if we try to save this as a document that has a different name, we may run into issues of saving a document that already exists. It will not allow us to do that. I do know that this form is not currently in the system, not unless you've gone and manipulated the forms in the system already. You've worked it ahead and said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and knock this out already. If you've done that, well, kudos to you for being proactive. But we do need to make sure that we use a form that's not currently named. So it has to be exactly these words right here, primary sales order form. From there, we're going to make a few changes. So first thing, we're going to do a basic printing because we're going to be printing out these forms for evidence. So let's go ahead and just change this from advanced to basic. And then we're going to go down here to the printing fields subtab. Okay. So the one that says printing fields. And you will notice that it currently has company logo and company address listed, but it doesn't have the company name. And I currently would like to have my company name appear on these forms. So let's go ahead and put a checkbox next to company name. Now, it's important to note we didn't have to make any changes up here, but something you want to confirm is that this form says now it should be checked as preferred. We are leaving that check mark there. We don't have to make any change here, but it's really important that this box is checked because this is going to be our new default form for all the transactions that we're going to be processing. This is going to be our new default form. So let's go ahead. We're going to make sure primary sales order form. We have basic printing type, and on printing fields, we've checked company name. Once you've made those three changes and exactly those three changes, go down here and click on save. And after it takes a second to cycle through, we're going to check and make sure that all of our work is done. So what you'll need to do is scroll down again to because it's sorted by type, and we're going to look for the sales order forms. And we should now have a new form, 324, called the primary sales order form. It may be a different ID number. That's what mine says. It says sales order, and most importantly, it is now our preferred form, which means that when we create a new sales order, it will default to this form. That is our goal here. Now, can we use other forms if we wanted to? Yes, but this is going to be our default form for all of our activities, and we're going to be checking that to make sure. All right. Like I said, there are three documents we need to edit. We've done one, so let's go ahead and do the next document. We're going to go up to the invoice form. So scroll up, and you will notice we currently have a default invoice called invoice, predictably enough, form 292. We're going to do the exact same steps as we did. The only difference being is instead of calling it primary sales order form, we're going to call it the primary invoice form. All right. So let's go ahead and walk through those activities again. Now walk through this one with me, and then we'll do the last one independently. So click on customize next to invoice. It's important to note that we are making very minor adaptations. You can actually make pretty extensive edits to these forms through this process. I'm just trying to keep this pretty simple so we can see what's capable of, but not necessarily have to go into a lot of detail. Again, we're going to add primary at the beginning, and we're going to add form at the end. So it should say primary invoice form. Wording is very important on this, not just primary invoice, not invoice form, full primary invoice form. We're going to change the printing type to basic. And again, we're going to go down to printing fields, and we're going to add the company name in the printing. So exactly the same three changes as before. We add primary and form to the name, change the printing type to basic. We add the company name to the printing fields. Also, you want to make sure that we've got the form is preferred checked. It should be default checked. If it's not, make sure it is checked. I can't imagine the scenario which it would not be, but I do need to make sure that we cover all our bases. Once we've done that, go ahead and click on save. That's weird. Sure. Oh, what on earth? This is the problem that I run into when I've got a form that's like this. So give me just a second. I need to check something. All right, so for some reason, the primary invoice form got saved, even though I don't think I clicked on the save button. I've been watching a lot of Stranger Things season 4 lately, and so maybe some entity haunted my computer and started saving forms for me without my knowledge. I'm not sure what that's going to lead to, but if the lights start flickering, we're leaving the room. Okay. All right. Somebody's just say, "Oh, we get to cancel class," and we start looking. Somebody's going to want a light switch and start going up and down. Yeah. We're not done yet. All right, so should have that primary invoice form saved. Again, the only changes we made is we changed the title to primary invoice form. We made sure the printing was basic, and we made sure the company name. So we're going to do one more. We're going to go down to customer payment, and we're going to do exactly the same thing we've done before. So go ahead and click on customize and make those same three changes. All right, so you should have 3 new forms that are created, or in my case, 2 new forms, and then one that's haunting my my NetSuite. Should have primary invoice form. Should have a primary customer payment form. You should also have a primary sales order form down in sales orders. And like I said, we are going to be using these for our transactions. These all should be preferred forms now. So please make sure you check and make sure that those are all listed as preferred forms. You can check by the check mark over there. And if you feel like you're in pretty good shape right there, then you're good to go. All right. We do have to move on to the revenue process, but I do want to check something. So remember back when we were talking about the purchasing process, we moved over to one of the accounting preferences. So let's go ahead and go back there. So I have to see if I remember. So let's go to setup, accounting, accounting preferences. Down here. Setup accounting. I kind of went through that quickly, but let's go ahead and go back. You'll have to scroll down a little bit to go to accounting preferences. So click on that. We're going to click on the order management tab here. Now, when we were talking about this in purchasing, we had to go through down here to the receiving. And remember, we removed the check mark from, or we made sure there was no check mark on bill in advance of receipt. This was a long time ago. I know that this is back in NetSuite number 4, which we did before the first exam. When we talked about this back in purchasing, I said, what is the reason we removed that? It's because we don't want our vendors sending us invoices before they've sent us goods, because they might get away with that, and we don't want to be paying for goods and services we didn't actually receive. We're going to do another check here. And again, there should not be any required editing, but we do need to make sure that we have the integrity. So let's scroll all the way back up to the top. And you'll notice up here, we've got sales orders, and it says the default sales order status is pending approval. Go ahead and click on the down arrow, and you'll notice that it says pending approval versus pending fulfillment. So logically speaking, which one of these do you think we want? So we have a sales order that we create. Do we want to make sure that that sales order gets approved, or do we want it immediately to move to a fulfillment? Right, we want approval first. We would like to make sure that when a sales order is created, that somebody reviews it and says, this is a proper sales order. We want to make sure that that step gets taken care of. So we're going to leave it on pending approval. Why might we have this pending fulfillment? Why do you think this NetSuite actually has this option here? Shouldn't all sales orders get approved? What if we're talking about something really small where transactions are really, really quick and consistent, and approval is kind of a formality? Like, this is a bad example because we don't have sales orders occur, but do you think that they need to approve every single transaction that goes on a Taco Bell? It's like, yes, I'd like a chalupa. Okay, let me get my manager to approve this transaction. And the manager says, again, we have so many customers. Yeah. So there might be a scenario in which we do not need to go through approval process because we're doing a lot of small transactions. But in our scenario, we're going to assume every time a sales order is created, it has to go through an approval process. So this is why we have pending approval listed here instead of pending fulfillment. All right. Everybody ready to create some sales orders? Hope so, because that's why we're here. Go to transactions, sales, enter sales order. We're going to do the first step in the process. Transactions, sales, enter sales orders. Now I want to reiterate, presumably we would have a purchase order from our customer that would have been sent to us. And at some point in time, I'm going to get around to creating a purchase order that I'll have as a document associated with this. But right now, I want you to imagine that you have a purchase order that you've either received electronically or even a physical purchase order that's an intangible and that only you can see, okay? Since we're talking about Stranger Things, we can talk about things that no one else can see, all right? But you've got a purchase order here. Your responsibility at this point is to say, I've received a purchase order from the customer. I need to enter this as a sales order so it goes into the system. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to first of all make sure that we have our primary sales order form listed here. Does everybody have the primary sales order form listed? This is a form we just created, so it should be the one that defaults to, because that's a preferred form. Let's go ahead and type in the number 10 for customer. If I'd been really clever, I would have made this customer number 11 since I'm talking about Stranger Things. You get it? Yeah. Anyway. All right. So this is Zenith Systems. Which we can go ahead. Oops. And enter that item. It's going to be subsidiary defaulting to United States West. Now, there are a couple things that we're going to enter here. The first of these, we're going to enter a customer purchase order number. Now, this is not an internally generated number. Remember, all of our internally generated items are automatically generated. So why are we entering a purchase order number here? This is one that's given to us by the customer. This is their purchase order number we're using for internal documentation. So since this is accounting 367, we're going to make this purchase order number A367. Now we need to do one more thing. We have to specify it. And by the way, if you miss this step, if you skip this step because you weren't paying attention, this is where you will run into problems. How do I know this? Experience, okay? Because I did skip this step in some of my previous examples. So on location, we need to specify US1. I actually have this in my notes. If you skip the location entry, it will create significant problems in the future. So do not skip the location entry. Make sure you put that in as US1. Everything else is relatively adaptive, but that one right there, you skip that one, you're going to be in for a world of woe. All right, so let's go ahead and check and make sure we got our items. We got our US dollar exchange rate that's automatically entered. Status is pending approval. Is what we wanted to have it listed as, because we have to approve this purchase order. It's going to have to go through that step. And again, our form is going to be our primary sales order form, which is the default we created. So let's go ahead and make some items for purchase, because our customer is going to buy from us. What was the item that we created? Yes, I love AIS. Yeah, textbook. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Everybody loves AIS anyway. So we're going to create that I love AIS textbook, and they're going to buy 5 of these. Because they have 5 times the love of AIS as the normal student right there. Yeah. That's basically all you need to enter. Is you need to enter the name of the item. And if you decided to enter some other name, whatever the item is, okay, if you said I love AIS textbook, kudos for you, but quantity. Now, a couple of interesting notes. When we did this back in the purchasing process, it was $14.99, but it's $29.99 now. And I know this is a silly question, but why are the amounts different? We had a discount, but there's a little bit of a different reason for that. We're selling these books instead of buying them. Okay, when we bought them for $15. We're selling them for $30, which is quite a markup right there, but it's still a pretty good value. And you'll notice we have 30 on hand because that was the 30 that we purchased. Okay, but we're gonna change that availability here in just a second because we're gonna be selling 5. So let's go ahead and click on add. And that's all we're going to do right now. That's all we're going to do right now, but we are going to make some modifications to other areas. We're not going to sell any other items, but we are going to make some other modifications. So let's go to our shipping sub-tab up here. Now the shipping date, we don't need to modify. Technically speaking, our shipping date is going to be a little bit later on. Actually, let's go ahead and make a change just for fun. Let's go ahead and make a change. Let's click on the calendar and we're going to ship on the 29th. Why? Because that's a week from today. That's when we're going to take care of the shipping step. So let's go ahead and ship on the 29th. On the shipping carrier, leave it as more, and shipping method, go to UPS. Now, why it says the shipping character is more and the shipping method is UPS, I have no idea, okay? I've tried to make the modification of the shipping character being UPS, and it just freaks out on me when I do that. Some things I can't explain about NetSuite. In fact, most things I can't explain about NetSuite, but I do know what works. For our shipping costs, let's say we're going to charge them $10 for shipping because we are not Amazon Prime. It's important to note here that even though we're going to kind of take this as default, if we are the salesperson, we would also want to make sure that we check and see that our shipping item matches what the address is that would be in the purchase order. So we'd want to check the shipping address according to the purchase order. We're going to assume that that's correct. Since I didn't provide a purchase order for you, we're going to assume that's correct, but this would be an important step as well. Also, let's go ahead and change the billing items. Because we like to have a little bit of variety, let's go ahead and change the terms from net 30 to 1% 10 net 30. This will allow us to deal with the discounts, which we'll deal with in a little bit. All right, so just to review, got our customer, Zenith Systems, PO number A367. Very important, location US1. Should have this automatically entered. All these should be automated. Our items, we're selling 5 of whatever the items you created. I created 5 I Love AIS textbooks, which we're selling right down here for 5 of those. Shipping terms, we're going to be shipping next week. It's going to be shipping method UPS, shipping cost $10, checking our address, and our billing terms are going to be 1%, 10, net 30. So everybody got that down? All right, let's save this thing. All right, does anybody want to predict where we're at once we save this document? What do we need to do? What is going to be our next step you think we're going to need to do after this? Approve, okay, which that's actually going to be our next step. But before we get to that, we're going to do an additional sub-step. And if the timing was right, then we would have gone to the next screen right as I finished just talking. But unfortunately, I can't predict what NetSuite's going to do. So look at this. Sales order is pending approval. All right. So yeah, we got that approval. We're going to go through the approval step here in just a second. But before we do that, we need to actually do something that's required for the assignment. Your deliverable for this assignment is the copy of this purchase order, or sorry, this sales order. So just like we've done for all of our other items, let's go over, hover over the printer icon. And let's click on print. And there's our sales order. Now, what do we need to do from this point right here? Yeah, print and save as a PDF. Do not save the file as a .nl file, save as a PDF, and that's what you're going to be your upload for this assignment. So make sure you save the PDF. Once you've done that, you can submit that for your assignment. Now, I'm going to give you a second to save the PDF. Please do not try to upload your assignment because we still have another step we need to go through. So if you're submitting for your assignment and then miss this next part, then you'll miss the next steps that are important. So we have to approve this. What would be involved in the approval process? What do you think should be some rational questions we'd want to ask? So what is the approval step for anyway? To make sure that we're actually extending customers to credit to customers who are going to eventually pay for that. We don't want to extend credit to customers who are never going to pay us back. So let's go ahead and do some review of this organization, 10 Zenith Systems. You notice there's a hyperlink here for the customer. Let's go ahead and click on that hyperlink. So again, if you go over here to where on the sales order, there's customer listed in blue. We're just going to click on their name, which is a hyperlink. And it's going to take us to some information about the customer. So now we have some information about Zenith Systems, and it tells us a little bit about the organization. Some of this is relevant. One of the most important things is they're operating out of US West, which we can actually fulfill because we're the US West subsidiary. But one of the most important things we need to do is we need to check some financial information. So down here, we're going to scroll down a little bit to this purple strip, and we're going to click on the financial tab. Now look at their credit limit. Their credit limit is $500,000. So why are they buying 5 textbooks? That's really, really strange. But ignoring that, okay, what are we concerned about? We're concerned that they have no overdue balance and that they don't have any days that are overdue on their items. Because that's a signal, if they have overdue balances and the days that are overdue on their items, that's a signal that they are not going to pay us back on future purchases. So let's check. Their overdue balance is currently 0, all right? How many days do they have items overdue? They have nothing currently that's overdue. So how do you think is the person who's doing the credit authorization? Do you think that this is a worthwhile customer to extend credit to? I agree. I think we should go ahead and extend credit, which if we don't extend credit, it's problematic because I have no other examples to walk through for the rest of the examples. So we're going to go ahead and check that and make sure. So let's go ahead and click on the back button. So we've all agreed as a class, nobody's a dissenting voice, that we're going to approve this customer for credit. So if that's the case, let's go ahead and click on approve. This is part of that review process. Now it's important to note the person who entered this order is not the same person who would do the approval step. I know that we're all doing this step together because we're in the administrator role, but it's important to note that that's part of that segregation of duties that we talked about before the exam 1. The person who's approving is separate from the person who's entering the transaction. So those would be 2 different individuals. All right, now we're pending fulfillment, which basically means that we are going to ship out goods to the customers. However, we've only got 15 minutes left in class, so we've still got homework to do, so we're going to stop here. Now you can upload your PDF file to the Brightspace link, because we're done with talking about the things we're going to be doing in NetSuite for the day. But I'm going to go ahead and start working through the multiple choice questions while you all are working through that, because I want to make sure that we get at least through that, since we've only got a few minutes left in class. Which of the following best describes a data visualization? So data visualization is that idea that we're going to share the story with people who we're trying to communicate our findings to, because this is part of that AMPS model process, the data analysis process. So ask the question, master the data, perform the analysis, share the story. Visualization is going to be primarily part of share the story. It can be part of perform the analysis, but we'll get to that. So what's going to be the best answer for that? Well, it says D, and graphical representation that presents information to decision makers. That sure sounds like that share the story element that we talked about before. So D is our answer. Then we have a lot of questions that relate to different types of visualizations and what their respective uses are. So which was used to show trend over time. So trend over time would be saying, here's my gross profit percentage. I want to see what it did in 2000 and 2001, 2000 or 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, so on and so forth. So we're going to see dots on a graph, and then how do we connect those dots? That is going to be a line, okay? So a line chart is the best representation of trends over time. That would be the best one to use. Now, can we use other ones? Certainly, but they're not going to be as effective visual representations. What about which of the following charts generally the best way to show proportions? So proportions saying we want to look at the 100% distribution of this particular item within a population and what percentage a particular item was. So we talked about that for this class. I said, how do I distinguish between who's sophomores, who's juniors, and who's seniors in this class? What did I say I would put that into? It'd be a donut chart or a pie chart. Good, very good. Moving on to question number 5. These are going to be talking about our different types of visualization. So this is going to be the visualization that we'll use less of the time, I guess I should say. This will be less frequent that we use this type of visualization. But visualizations can be performed to perform the analysis. This means there's not really a separation between data analysis and sharing of the story, but we use our visualization tool for data analysis tasks. Now, I will say this is a perfectly viable form for doing this. Tableau and Power BI both have very powerful data analysis tools embedded in them. So if we want to do some analysis in the visualization tool, we can do that. If that's the case, what type of analysis are we performing here if we're doing that? Okay. The answer is this is basically where we're at the exploring step, the exploration step. We're trying to ask questions and come up with answers. So this would be an exploratory visualization. Now, how does this distinguish from the share the story step? Okay, when we communicate results to decision makers, that's when we share the story. It's the last step in the AMPS model. That is where we basically have already performed our analysis, and now we're trying to explain the results to decision makers. And you know, there's a reason I use the word explain the results, because this is an explanatory analysis. It's an explanatory analysis, so explanatory visualizations would be appropriate. All right, question number 7. Which of the following statements is true? By the way, I really dislike questions like this because you have to go through every single answer and make sure you know it's correct. So let's go ahead and go through every single answer. They're good for education, but I don't really like asking questions like this on exams. Scatter plots show values of two variables, each plotted on its own axis to exhibit potential trends, okay? So we're really close there, but are we looking for trends in a scatter plot analysis? No. What are we looking for? We're looking for correlation, which is actually our answer in B, but let's go ahead and talk about C and D. Graphs show values of two variables, each plotted on its own axis to exhibit potential trends. No. We just talked about the reason why. So graphs show values of two variables, each plotted on its own axis to exhibit potential correlation. So it's important to note that this is distinguished. When we're talking about graphs can actually be more open-ended. You know, we're talking about graphs, they can actually show multiple different parameters, but the only one that shows correlation is going to be the scatter plot analysis, which is a unique type of visualization. It's not going to fall into the graphical analysis that we're talking about. So graphs do not do that. So bar graphs, line graphs, those types of charts, they're going to be not appropriate for that. Assume that Netflix wants to show the relative frequency of its sales by state, which of the following would be most appropriate. This is a geospatial analysis. So the easiest way to do a geospatial analysis, we talked about this at the end of our discussion on Monday, would be use a map, or a filled geographic map, or a symbol map would be the easiest way to go about that. Now, can you use other methods of visualization? Yeah, I think you could use a bar chart here because, again, if we're talking about individual locations, you could view those as different categories. But again, it's less effective than showing their geographic regions and showing them within a map itself. I think that's most efficient. And it's also got that dazzle factor. It's kind of like, oh, that's really cool, kind of showing how it looks within the map. All right. Yeah, that was it. That was all the other items, all the items I had. So then we had discussion questions. So we talked about this first question already, but I wanted to make sure that we reiterate this point because it's a really important one. I love Excel. Okay, I love Excel. I think Excel is a capable of very powerful area, very powerful functions. I think everybody should be good at Excel, and that should be one of the primary focuses. But if Excel has all these data analyst capabilities, why would we bother with Tableau or Power BI? It's an interesting question, okay? Because you're probably saying, well, that's a good question, Dr. Barnes. Why did you give us this assignment if we could just do this in Excel? And the answer is Excel is a good tool. It's a jack of all trades tool. It will give you skills in a lot of different areas. It will give you good data analysis skills. It will give you some visualization skills. It will give you some overarching good tools. It is not nearly as effective in certain capacities. Like there are definitely more powerful data analysis programs. Like if you've ever done coding, you probably have done R or SQL, and those are going to be much more powerful analysis tools. Alteryx is another good example, which is one that we use at the graduate level. I definitely think that those have far stronger capabilities than just traditional Excel. Same holds true for visualization. When we compared the visualization that was capable in Excel versus that we did in Power BI, we just scratched the surface of Power BI. Yet, can we all agree that the Power BI was looking a lot cleaner, a lot nicer? Hopefully that's the case. That's what I'm trying to lead you to, is that it's a much more powerful tool. It's also adaptive because when you do when you do a routine in Excel, it does not adapt to changes in data or filtering unless you use a very specific graph type. Whereas in Power BI, not only can you actually create those tools that filter on data automatically, you can do it for multiple charts at a time simultaneously. Now, this is not to say you can't do good things and powerful things in Excel, but it is much more challenging to get to that level of quality and that level of adaptivity. So I do think that getting good skills in Excel as your baseline is very important. You should use those to parlay those into good data analysis and good data visualization techniques. So important to keep in mind there. All right, last thing I want to do, let's go ahead and just really quickly talk about this. So you have to give me a second. I need to log into the remote desktop real quick. All right, so I only wanted to do this real quick. I assume that everybody was able to get through this without any trouble because I didn't get any emails saying, Dr. Barnes, I have no idea what's going on. But I did provide some tips on there, hopefully that helped out. Mostly, I just wanted to talk about what you could do for moving forward from this activity because this is a pretty cut and dry activity. So we're just going to go ahead and I'm just going to import the workbook and I'm just going to talk really quickly. I'm going to walk through the process very quickly because again, I'm assuming that everybody did this and it was not particularly challenging for them. But I do think it's very interesting that they chose to actually use additional tools on top of this instead of ones that was a default to Power BI. They said, let's go ahead and use Word Cloud, which is one that we have to add onto this. But yeah, has anybody ever done a Word Cloud in other applications before? Yeah. So word cloud is kind of interesting in the fact that you can, it's very common in survey responses, which this is a series of survey forms. That's kind of why it hit that or hit this. But I'm trying to talk and do stuff at the same time, and I'm just terrified I'm going to completely mess something up. So I'm going to stop talking so I can make sure I get done with this and don't keep you all along. All right. So I'll admit, when I was messing with the word cloud the other day, I clicked on this and then nothing appeared on my screen and I was just freaking out. I was like, what the heck's going on? It's like, I don't have word cloud selected, and that's why. There we go. All right. So the thing I want to talk about here is a few things that you'd want to do here in the editing. First of all, I'm going to turn the title off because that column 1 is just kind of sticking out. Now, in the instructions that it gave, it basically said that it wanted to let's see, Yeah, it wanted to limit this maximum number of words of 200. I think that this is actually a more robust visualization if you leave 200 words in there. If you limit it down to 50 words, it just kind of all the information disappears. And did anybody come up with the exact same word cloud as was used in the example? I didn't either. I was like saying, nah, this doesn't look anything like it. So I kind of like the idea of losing 200 words. So if we're doing this for analysis and value, what we'd want to do is we want to eliminate stop words that we think are relevant. Now, in the example that used the stop words, it like class, professor, and some other examples. In the question itself, it said, what attributes did your best professor have to date? And so I think that kind of gives you some easy ones to remove. Obviously, professor is an easy one. If you want to filter other ones out, like look at some of these. Like it also says that it kind of I probably should in general. Oops. It's got to and. I remember there was some stop words that you could remove from that as well. But I'm going to ignore those for the time being. So again, if you look and see, some words are just going to naturally appear and you can kind of get rid of those because you want to get that. But the goal here would be is not necessarily to develop a word cloud, but you want to have this a word cloud that has value. So like words like what and his and taught, those are not necessarily things that you're trying to associate. You're trying to pick out values there. And so there's a little bit of a trade-off here with respect to this, is that if you did this analysis, if you limit it down to 50 words, then you were limiting the number of values that you got. If you wanted to do a more robust analysis, you'd have to do additional work associated with this. That being said, it's kind of neat to see the adaptivity and kind of a simple visualization that would actually provide some context. This would be something that in a presentation, in a classroom setting, would be very valuable because you'd be able to show kind of something that's a quantitative metric and a qualitative method, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, we're done for today. We'll be back on Friday for more Excel and more AI. See you then.